Howdy, folks. Happy Tuesday. It's a heat wave in Buffalo. It's up to 17 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know what it is in Winnipeg.
Here, I'm fine.
And Peter is in an igloo somewhere.
No, it's actually balmy today. It's like -9 Celsius. It's lovely.
There you go. Russ, get us started off with the pre-show.
Yeah, so I read this morning, I got a chuckle. Darren Ravel was reporting that a lawyer in Louisiana is suing the NFL to get them to replay the last part of the game with the correct call inserted because, again, the Saints were wrong. And we all agree the Saints were wrong.
Yes.
But you're not getting the NFL to replay a game. And the guy, look, I'm sure this guy's doing it on his own dime, but you know what? Go donate that money to furloughed federal workers who could really use it, and don't waste money on baloney like this.
Look,
that's all it is.
There's something came out about this, and that there is a incredible rule that allows Roger Goodell or the NFL commissioner to actually go and say, we're replaying the game. Not that I expect Roger Goodell to do it, nor would I even think it came on his radar as an option for him, but it does exist. The problem is, how do you go and say that call was so egregious compared to all the other baffling calls that have happened in recent history in the NFL and say, this is the one that tips the scales to replay the game?
No, you're right.
You can't. You can't.
And ironically, apparently the NFL has sort of leaked it out there that they may address having replay review pass interference calls when they go over the rules for the foul for next season, which doesn't do the New Orleans Saints any good. And by the way, I think that frivolous lawsuits and investigations are born in Louisiana because remember when the Kennedy assassination was investigated, Jim Garrison, who was a joke of a district attorney, was the guy who was, proclaiming that, if you watch the movie JFK, it took it as it's serious, the Clay Shaw and these other guys, when they probably had nothing to do with it. It was all sensationalistic to get Garrison some fame. But and I think
let's vote on something here.
Yeah,
let's vote on what we believe. And Peter, you don't have to do it because you probably haven't watched enough NFL games. What the most egregious or worst call ever was? I'm going to say it's the Tuck rule call that Brady got away with not fumbling the ball.
That's a good one.
That's a good one. The fumble, the fumble forward call, the Stabler Dave Casper one in San Diego.
I watched that live. I was screaming at my television. That was an abomination.
Wasn't there one with the Browns and one of those infamous Elway drives too? I can't recall. Maybe there wasn't. Maybe it was just Elway being Elway.
Yeah.
There's a lot, though. I mean, there are the Des Bryant one for sure.
Yes,
home run throwback, which I think was a lateral.
Yeah.
But they didn't have the angle for the replay.
Right.
So that they couldn't it wasn't overturned due to lack of evidence, but there's been NFL films have shown that a few times, and it looks like, I think it was Frank Wycheck when he threw it to Kevin Dyson, I think it was. And Dyson was like standing on like a yard ahead or half a yard ahead. So it should have never counted. But of course it was the Bills and they got screwed.
Yeah. I think go ahead, Peter.
No, I was just going to say, we talked about this yesterday, the idea that, you bring in instant replay for PI and it's being done in the CFL. I brought this up before. International Rugby and Rugby Union has a other official sitting watching video replays and will communicate with the head referee or the head official on the pitch, and they will stop the clock or they'll run the clock and add injury time like soccer on. Right. And it's just done really fast. Just a video. Yep. I mean, the thing is that it doesn't have to be complicated. It's simply, dude, no one really saw it, or these guys missed it. They didn't see the right angle in the play. They weren't watching clearly. That was clear PI. Flag goes up, play it on. It's not a big time suck. And that's I think the worry that people are having is that there's a time suck. So put a maximum 90-second limit on the review.
Yeah.
And that's, if you can't conclude it, play as the field stands.
No, I agree. I think there definitely should be a time right before the the Super Bowl, Roger Goodell always has this, sort of
State of the league,
the NFL address. And so that's not enough just to address that, because that is the obvious. Like, that's something that should have been, again, if the CFL had adopted that, why didn't the NFL adopt that? That's the biggest question. And he has to answer for that, because just saying that it's just the rules committee is a cop out. But then also the way overtime is, to keep it the same in the playoffs. And, somebody said, well, you're already saying that because it affected Brady. I'm like, no, you know what? The first game I was thinking about it, and the second game pointed out exactly why. And so that has to be addressed too. And if that's going to get swept under the rug, I'm telling you, this sport, people are getting tired of it, and the betting public is going to lose faith in it. And I'm already seeing those posts.
I mean, an hour, like I said it yesterday, an hour and 20 minutes for the fourth quarter and overtime. It's because of reviews, all because of reviews. So it's getting to be like the NBA, where the last 3 minutes of the fourth quarter takes 45 minutes because of all the friggin' timeouts.
Peter's in Canada. Peter, did you notice that, like, the betting public was kind of like just aggravated the whole weekend, not because they lost money, but because of like the referees and the way the sport is. And I see a lot of it out there. I don't know if you saw it.
You mean about like aggravation?
Yeah. Like again, the Saints line gets affected. The way that overtime affects the betting. I mean, I mean, the betting up here, like, I mean, I know a few people who, and they're not gamblers, but they bet and they will pay attention to it. Not as big a deal. The culture of betting up here isn't the same. Okay.
It exists. There are people who are very into it. There's lots of professional gamblers, but 1/10 of the population, it doesn't factor into the same way.
Well,
I mean, yeah, I mean, I think there was, I think I read of a couple stories about some bettors in Vegas who literally like lost their shirts. Well, not lost their shirts, but like it changed everything. But I also read that the MGM Sportsbook made a mint because it went into OT.
Well, yeah. Well, this is the funny thing, and I listen occasionally when it's an interesting subject to Bill Simmons's podcast, and he was talking about, and he had some guy who like loves to gamble, and apparently there is basically like an eBay for gamblers out there where they can put like a prop bet that they made at the beginning of the year on this mechanism to sell it to somebody else, and somebody had bought a New Orleans Saints Super Bowl bet, and they bet $2,000, and the odds were like 80-1 or something like that. It was or maybe an 8,000. They could have won $160,000 cash in the ticket, but they put it on this thing and said, "I'll take, 50,000 for it because I want the guaranteed money." And this guy and some other guy bought the ticket and of course got screwed by the pass interference call. Now, I would never, do that because I'm a cheapskate, but I mean, some of the things, I mean, the over under in the Kansas City New England game was in the 50s. I think it was like 56 or 57. It was 17-14 with 10 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter, and it lost the over under by almost 10 points.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're begging to lose your money if you bet football, or even if you think something about any other sport. It's impossible to really predict. So I would recommend to people, just don't bet, but they will anyway. So what the hell?
They will. They're not going to listen.
And just one final thing on the lawsuit. This is akin to the Montreal police trying to arrest Zdeno Chara and the Toronto police back in the 80s trying to arrest Dino Ciccarelli for assault for high-sticking Luke Richardson. The courts and the law, unless it's murder on ice or murder on the football field, should stay out of sports.
Yeah, I agree.
Hello, Hockey World. Today is Tuesday, January 22nd, 2019.
I'm Peter Tessier in slightly warmer Winnipeg.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Well, let's start with this because we talked about the Edmonton Oilers yesterday, and I referred to them as a cesspool and a cluster of an organization. And
they must feel bad about that today, right, Mike?
And basically, Peter Chiarelli came out a couple hours after the Buzzcast and said, "Hold my beer," because they signed. And okay, nothing against Mikko Koskinen. He's had an okay year. He comes over from the KHL this year. He signs a 1-year contract. I think it was $2.5 million with the Oilers. And he's played more than I thought he would, because I thought Talbot would be the go-to guy. But Koskinen has been used more by Hitchcock. And clearly they were going to either sign one of them and trade the other one, or vice versa. And they decided to re-sign Koskinen. But after, less than half a season, a little more than half a season, and not a great swath of games, they give him a 3-year deal at $4.5 million AAV with a limited no trade clause. And Peter Chiarelli just reinforced my opinion that this team is clueless and doesn't know what the hell they're doing.
So to go back to the Mikko Koskinen draft story, so he got drafted, I think, in the 2nd round, and 31st overall. And
by the Islanders.
Right, by the Islanders. And I thought that was too high. I thought he could be an NHL goalie, but I was like, wow, 2nd round pick for him. I don't know when he's going to be an NHL goalie. So to me, that's a bit risky. And, the Islanders played him 4 games in 2011 and decided he wasn't. And then he came back this year. So literally, you're talking about a guy who's got 27 games in the NHL, and he gets a limited no trade clause. Mm-hmm. I don't even understand it. I think the PA's got to be laughing and jumping up and down in glee. But if you're another player out there who's had a GM say, hey, you're not vested enough in this league or whatever, and I'm not giving it to you for this reason or that reason.
Right.
This is unbelievable because, again, goaltending's hard to figure out. It is. And he's got a .911 save percentage, and he's done a little better than we all thought he would.
Right.
But this could still turn out to be a horrible contract.
This is just okay, so it came to light that he has a limited no trade clause too. What was your fear, Chiarelli? Honestly, this is crazy. This is a guy who's 31. Mm-hmm. Before this season, he had 4 games in the NHL in 2010-11, I believe it was.
Yep.
This is such a massive risk. I don't even know where to put it. And at the point where there are going to be goalies of similar pedigree with way more data to have come the offseason. Even if you took a cast off from what Philadelphia has in the pipeline,
right,
and just signed 1 year until you could, hey, hold on. I know this is a foreign word in Edmonton. Develop one, develop a goaltender, develop a player. You have enough guys to get you through. The problem is there is a mindset now that's set in of not just desperation, but the reality that we have to start doing something soon. And the only way we can do it is by dealing with what we know. So this may seem as a bargain. The other factor with this is all that cap space they're going to get next year. They just spent it on a guy with 27 NHL games.
Well,
it's insane.
First of all, they and I'm not defending the Oilers organization, but look at they've gone down the developmental road with Devin Dubnyk, and he only became a good goaltender after he went to 3 or 4 different teams and worked with Sean Burke in Arizona. You let me finish my point because that's what I was going to say.
All right,
This Brissois, Brissois went to Winnipeg, worked with Hellebuck's coach. And has become a pretty decent goaltender. But so there is clearly not patience or clearly not a mechanism to make these goalies good in Edmonton. Also, and Russ, give me your opinion on this. I think this is reflective of the organization realizing that there was no chance in hell that they could get Varlamov or Bobrovsky or any other goaltender who is going to be a unrestricted free agent to come to Edmonton unless they were going to be overpaid. And this is what we've said about players going to places like Winnipeg and Edmonton, and not as much in Winnipeg anymore because Winnipeg is a successful team and players will go there. But players are not going to go to an organization that clearly doesn't know what the hell they're doing.
Yeah.
I look, if you ask me what I really think happened here, and Mike, what you said is possible. What I think is more likely, and this is why earlier this year I said that Koskinen was Hitchcock's guy. Right. And I even said to Peter, it wouldn't shock me if they keep him. And Peter laughed. And I get why you laughed. But I think this is Ken Hitchcock liking this goalie, going to ownership and saying, you want to keep me here? Keep him here. And I think ownership went to Chiarelli and said, get it done. And that's why I can't fully blame Peter Chiarelli here, because there's still an owner and there's a coach that likes him.
So does this mean?
And I think there's a whole equation here.
Does this mean that, because most people think that Hitchcock is a 1-year thing and he won't be there next season as the coach? Does this mean that Hitchcock is going to be involved in management because he's got such sway with Cates and with?
No, I think it's just that he could be coming back as coach.
Russ, I don't disagree with your logic. Like, I think you've probably found a very plausible and likely way of how this came to be. There are so many flags in that way of thinking, though, right? Yeah. And I'm not criticizing what you're saying. I'm criticizing that if this is some of the thought process going through, there's a ton of problems. Here's another thing that we forget. Another thing that we forget about what's going on in Edmonton. Go back to 2002, and now you'll know this, but it was a big thing in Canada when the Olympic team was being made. Who's the brain trust of that? Wayne Gretzky. Bob Nicholson of Hockey Canada.
And Hitchcock
was one of the coaches.
Hitchcock was an assistant to Pat Quinn.
Yeah. Yep. There's some, again, I'll say this about picking national teams, particularly if you're Canadian. You'd have to be blind, deaf, and basically living underwater to not be able to pick a team that should qualify for a medal of the Canadian hockey talent that plays in the NHL. Somehow that same group couldn't do it in 2006.
Yeah.
Minus Hitchcock. I don't think Hitchcock was involved then.
I'm not sure.
No.
I'm not sure. So that shows you how fast things can change and the way they look at things. That should be very concerning if you're an Oilers fan. It should be very concerning if you're Daryl Cates. Then you add in the fact that they're surrounded by his boyhood heroes of Messier, Lowe. Who else is in there? Coffee now. Like, so Russ, to your point, now you've got all these other elements that are affecting the decision making. And if there was ever an organization that needed a bad idea guy, pay someone $250,000 to say bad idea enough times that everyone pauses, and you've saved yourself millions.
Yeah, the breakdown. Chris Johnston posted it. So 5.2 million next year, 5.2. Then in 2021, he gets 3.3 and a $500,000 signing bonus. And then 2021-22, when he's 33, 34 years old, $4.5 million.
Well, that first year might be not as bad because there could be a lockout. So, I'm saying maybe that was Edmonton.
2019-20, there won't be a lockout next year.
That's right. It's 2021. He gets the $500,000.
That's why they lowered it.
Yeah, he gets the bonus. He gets the $500,000 bonus on July 1. So he gets a little bit of something to live on. So yeah, I mean, and Connor McDavid, I guess he was interviewed by some Edmonton media, and he was essentially saying, if you don't like it here, if you don't want to play here, get out or something. I didn't see the direct quote, but it was insinuating that. And I'm like, I get it from his point of view that, right now he's under siege. That organization is under siege. Again, I look at that situation and I say, this guy is wasting the prime years of his career in an organization that can't shoot straight. And I'm just wondering, and I may be way off base here. He has an 8-year deal, and I think he's going to be entering year 3 of it next year. How much patience he's going to have, and that the ownership has got to think about that, because
they're not thinking about that. What they looked at.
Well, they're dumb if they're not.
I just saw a stat, and it's an advanced stat that kind of is good. And it shows that Koskinen's got an .831 save percentage in the slot. Like, that's his slot save percentage. And that's not great. Now, I also see the other posturing from some of the local media that, hey, this is Koskinen. These are Koskinen's numbers. These are Talbot's. Okay, great. He's better than Cam Talbot this year. We've talked about it. Goalies go up and down. But that doesn't mean you all of a sudden jump into a 3-year deal with this guy.
And Cam Talbot is a prototypical example of what you wrote about a few weeks ago, Russ, where this guy was so overplayed. You think Freddie Anderson was overplayed in Toronto? Look at what Talbot was used when they got to the second round of the playoffs and lost to Anaheim. He was beaten into the ground, and he's never played the same since. And that you just can't do that, especially with a team that relied a lot on McDavid and their offense in that year, and their defense was terrible.
Yeah.
So now one last question about this, then we'll move on. It's clear Talbot's going to get moved now. The indicators are there that, since he's a rental, and they're going to go with Koskinen. Maybe I'm sure they're going to have to get a goalie back to be able to not overuse Koskinen, but they're probably going to move Talbot. What do you think Talbot gets on the market?
What Talbot will get as far as in a trade right now?
Yeah.
I think he'll get a conditional second and a low level prospect. And I think the conditional second is if you trade him to Philly and they sign him, they'll give him a second. And then a prospect from the system, like a C-level prospect. And I think that's all you could hope for Cam Talbot, right? You've already devalued him by giving Koskinen this contract. So,
yeah.
Right. But if I'm Philly, I'm jumping in on it. And I know the knee-jerk reaction for Flyers fans is why? We have Carter Hart. Well, and we have, here, the thing is this. For one thing, Cam Talbot has played well in Philly. For another thing, Cam Talbot is used to bebopping back and forth from being a starter and not being a starter, being a tandem guy. Another thing is, even if you in your mind, meaning the Flyers and the fans, have decided Carter Hart is your number one, you don't want to play him more than 50 games next year. You don't. And that's not including if they were to make the playoffs. So you don't want to do that. So you have to have somebody who could play a lot of games. It's easy that the vernacular will be this year, well, we need a backup that could play 35 games. So many fans will just throw that out there. But the reality is, if you plan on being a competitive team, those 35 games matter a lot more than you think. And it's probably more than 35 games. It's more like 40-something games at least.
Now, switching to Toronto here, GM Kyle Dubas had a press conference today. It was sort of an impromptu press conference. And the reason being that they're looking for anything right now to sort of shake things up and maybe give the players sort of a mental day off. They've lost 6 of 7 games at home. The criticism and concerns about their defense and the slumps of Austin Matthews and a few other players have really picked up. And they wanted to give the team basically a mental and physical day off, meaning no practice. And apparently the Toronto media, under the rules of the PHWA, the team has to, when they have a day of practice, even if they cancel it, they have to make someone available. And the players weren't going to be on the ice. They weren't going to make them available. So Dubas came out and spoke to the media, and he gave them a few things that are interesting that we should talk about. Before
we do that, Mike, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
The question is, so clearly Dubas didn't want someone like Matthews talking. So he decided to go and get out there, because otherwise.
Well, Matthews talked yesterday. They practiced.
Yeah. But people were going to ask about Matthews probably today too, and so I think he presumptively did that, so Matthews didn't have to talk and spill the beans about what you're going to break.
There may be some of that, but I think since they talked yesterday, what was going to be asked, but the same questions over and over. So, what are you doing to get out of your slump? How do you feel? All these things, they asked those questions yesterday. I think they just said, okay, let's not go down that road again. Let's give them a day away. Let's, get ready they play Washington tomorrow, and then they have the 8-day break. So, but Dubas spoke to the media. And one of the things he did reveal is that there's been some progress in terms of negotiations with Matthews on an extension. And if you look at it this way, this is the perfect time for the Leafs to get him signed up, because not when he's scoring at a goal per game pace, because then you were hearing talking. This is not what the management and not what the agent are talking about, but what is out there from insiders and fans and people on social media, that Matthews was going to get close or as much as McDavid on a new contract. I've never thought that was going to be the case, but you could make the case when he's scoring at an 82 goal pace. He's now scored 1 goal in the last 11 or 12 games. And now it would be reasonable if they sign him for 11 or 11 and a half. And I think that number, and if that comes out, and Dubas wants to get that done before the trade deadline, so he has a little more cost certainty to know where things are going. They want to get that done. Do I think it'll get done? It's possible. The one thing that's clear is that Marner and his agent, Darren Ferris, have begged off. They said, we're not going to negotiate during the season. We're going to wait until the off season. That's their right.
Yeah.
So I'll talk about the Leafs in a minute, but Peter, I
will tell you this. Everybody should follow Mitch Marner's dad then before the season ends, because I'm sure he will break a few times on Twitter while those negotiations are happening. That's just a pro tip.
If he's still on Twitter, because remember, after that article in the Athletic,
I think he
yanked him. He pulled his account down.
Okay.
But Peter, we've talked about the parallels between Toronto and Winnipeg, and I'll talk about the Leafs in a second. But in Winnipeg, I'm not hearing anything about Laine. I'm not hearing anything about Connor. No. I mean, is it just all on the down low, and nothing is being talked about?
I think the last thing I heard about Laine in his contract was they agreed to talk after the season, and it was just a friendly we'll talk. I've heard nothing about Connor. The only thing that's come up is that Jacob Trouba is eligible for an extension as of January 1st, and there's been no murmur of a talk between Cheveldayoff and Overhart. So that's the only thing. When people put on their sort of speculative hats around Laine in Jets world, there are people who think of, well, he's slowed down on his scoring. There's some challenges with his play. Maybe there's a reason to bridge him. Well, I don't think that's going to happen.
No.
Dream
on. But I do think he's not coming in near Matthews level. I do think he's going to come in around an Ovechkin level, and I don't think you could even put inflationary on it because I don't think his game is warranting enough to say you're going to get 8 figures. I just don't think it'll happen. I think Kevin Cheveldayoff has found a really good way of managing his salaries well to date. The Blake Wheeler one remains a bit of a question. But so far, he hasn't overpaid anyone grossly. And this will be the next test. The interesting thing that's coming out around this, and this is going to come out in discussions around the Leafs, as everything does, is what are these players doing in certain roles and who's helping them succeed and who isn't. Right. And right now, the interesting thing is that when Laine and Connor are playing with Brian Little and any combination with Brian Little, their production plummets. And the 2 biggest play drivers on the forwards of the Jets are Wheeler and Scheifele. You put anyone with them, magic happens.
Yeah.
And so there's this thing of the with or without you conversation. I think that's going to come into the play here. The other interesting thing that comes to Line A.
Can I comment on the one thing?
Yeah, for sure.
So Patrick Line is a lot like Alex Ovechkin. He doesn't make anybody better. It still doesn't mean he doesn't deserve his money.
Right. But what could be the case? And you think this way, and then you say, no, they wouldn't do this. But I mean, I've long thought that teams in the years before the players are up for contract might put them in situations where it doesn't maximize their value. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I mean, Mitch Marner is playing with John Tavares. Mitch Marner is going to make big money no matter what. Austin Matthews was denied playing with William Nylander because of Nylander's contract impasse, and has had his best success with guys like Andreas Janssen and Kasperi Kapanen. And those players played well, and Matthews played well with them. All of a sudden, as soon as Nylander comes back, Matthews is there, and Matthews' numbers have plummeted. Don't you think that? I mean, I'm not saying that they're purposely sabotaging him, but there is a benefit in the long term for Matthews not to score 60 goals walking into out of his entry level deal.
So they can't control that, though.
Mike, the conversation in Winnipeg has come up on whether the Jets might be sandbagging Line A.
Right.
And here's where the rationale comes in, and maybe it's the same happening with Matthews, given where the Leafs are and stuff. At a certain point, you can coach players, you can put them in favorable positions with certain line mates that favor them and help things happen. But you're not always going to have that option. And it has a trickle-down effect of other things in the roster. With Line A, you could boost his numbers in production by probably putting him up with Scheifele and Wheeler, or Scheifele and stuff. Maurice hasn't done it. The only moves he's made between the top two lines when everyone's healthy is just moving Ehlers and Connor down. Learn and work through it on his own. They're not giving him the support. They let everyone 2 years ago, all the young guys, come and learn and screw up and make mistakes, and it was teachable moments. Line A in this case is not being pulled out to get assistance by having him with a play driver like Perreault or Scheifele. They're letting him work things out. So two things. One, it shows that they trust him to do this stuff on his own. They're giving him the freedom and the responsibility, but it also works a little in their favor when it comes to production. But you know what? Those 2 40-goal seasons, or 38 and 44 last year, aren't going away. Like, they're still there, and they are going to be brought up, and they're going to be discussed, and they're going to be valued at it. Because when, Line A isn't going to turn into a Jonathan Chichu, right? No. Like, he's not going that way. It's not happening. So this is it's there, but there's going to be a little bit of pulling back here from the 8 figures. I think. I don't think it's going to 8 figures, but it's going to be high 7s.
I mean, again,
I think that's the right way to do it.
Yeah, I know of a guy's career, and he'll have more upswing again, and they'll talk about it, and they'll point out, look, they'll bring in all the positive numbers they could find. Trust me.
I think the compromise for both Line A and Marner is going to be shorter term than 8 years.
Right.
I think that's the way it's going to go, because if you think of it in the Winnipeg sense, then Wheeler's contract is over with if you sign Line A to a 5-year deal, and then you free up that money to give to Line A on a new deal. Whereas, and the same thing with Marner. There's been talk about a 5-year deal with Marner at around $9 million or below the 8-figure mark, as you said. If they do that, sure, you'd run the risk of him being a UFA at 26, but Tavares' contract expires the year after, and you're freed up. If you have Matthews locked up for 2 or 3 more years, you're freed up to pay Marner more than even Matthews on a new deal. So, I mean, there is some tactics going on here between Cheveldayoff and Dubas regarding how to allocate that money going forward. And that's why I think Dubas wants to get Matthews locked up as soon as possible so he knows where he can go at the deadline and in the summer.
They need to know. And for the Jets, it's even more complicated because you have 2 plus you have Trouba.
Right.
They need to know where they're where they have to have not a ballpark, But you need to know, am I in left field and you're in right?
Yeah.
Or are we going to move into center together and we know, okay, we're playing within $1 million or $500,000 of each other on this angle and this and these things. And okay, well, this will get solved.
Well,
but you need to know if it won't.
I'm
That's
going
the bigger
under
problem.
I'm going under the assumption with both teams that Trouba in Winnipeg and that Jake Gardiner in Toronto are both gone at the end of this year.
And I think that's the right assumption.
Right. Unless all of a sudden they decide to take well below what they can get in unrestricted free agency. And I know Gardiner loves it in Toronto, and he's a big part of that organization, of the team, in terms of, he's best buddies with everybody. And Dubas came out today in defense of Gardiner with all the booing and the criticism of him. Yeah. It's not going to mean anything. I mean,
contract.
Right. And that's a good thing to do, because you're the general manager, you're the leader of the organization. This is a guy who you value and that you need to play well to have success this year. But next summer, it's not going to matter a hill of beans about, criticism. What's going to matter is what he can get on the open market. And right now, after Erik Karlsson, Jake Gardiner might be the most valuable free agent defenseman out there, which means he's going to get $6.5 to $7 million, and the Leafs simply cannot afford that. So, I don't know whether
the and then they sign Gardiner. They may ask Gardiner to sit a little while on the market.
That's possible,
and make that trade, and then come to him with an offer. That wouldn't shock me, by the way.
Now, the other thing, and then we'll move on for this, and we'll take some questions in the chat. Peter's got to go a few minutes early, but the interesting thing is that the one other thing from this press conference is Dubas came out and said, he's been talking a trade about a top 4 defenseman, drink Russ, and that there's been some effort out there to sort of diminish the value of some of the Maple Leaf prospects within their organization. I'm not sure if he's talking about writers writing top 50 prospects in the game or other teams. He seems to say that other teams are extremely interested in their prospects. This is normal when it comes to doing business between general managers in the league. You put a story out there that a certain prospect on another team is not who we like, or not who we don't think he's as good as the other team does. That's whole part of the negotiating process. I really don't think that it matters one way or the other, and I don't think it's reflective of what these teams will be looking for from the Leafs.
Devil's advocate. Devil's advocate is, when Steve Yzerman was with Tampa, he got ridiculous value for his prospects. Actually, we talk about that this week on Hockey Prospect Radio. You're going to have to tune in to find out. But he did, right? And in some of his trades, if you think about it, guys were overvalued.
Yep.
So I think, and again, this may not be fair, I think there might be a little bit of undervaluing going on with Toronto, because I think this is GM's testing Kyle Dubas. They don't know what Kyle Dubas is yet.
Right. I agree with that, but I can tell you, based on seeing them, most of them play in the Calder Cup playoffs, based on how they've played this year, that there are very good prospects down in the American Hockey League.
I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, they have a couple future NHL defensemen in Liljegren and Rasmus Sandin. It's just a question of how long. It could be 2 or 3 years. They've got 3 or 4 forwards that are pretty good. I mean, they're not going to keep all of them. They're probably going to move 1 or 2 of them, or their first round pick to make a deal. But that, again, it's all part of the negotiating process. It's you can't, like if you're with Winnipeg, we don't like Sami Niku, we don't like this guy, we don't like that guy, so give us Jack Roslovic.
Well, that's the whole thing. Like, talking about negotiations, like a big deal now for Dubas is like what happens this offseason. Like, he's going to be judged by the fans on that, because they don't have a lot to go by in the Kyle Dubas era so far.
Yeah.
And the one thing that they have to go by is the contract of Nylander. And right now, 20 games in, that looks like ill-advised, so to say. I'll be kind to say.
Well, again, I mean, I think fans. So I'd like to know the percentage of fans that are ripping Dubas to shreds for this deal, but are also the same ones who said, "Well, you can't trade him. We need him."
Right.
Because you can't have both. And it takes 2 to make a contract. two sides. Dubas could have sat there and said $5 million till hell froze over. It doesn't mean you were going to get him for $5 million. And that's the thing that you always have to remember about in contracts is it's two sides. Sometimes one side is grossly over-equipped to deal with it than the other. Clarkson versus Nonis. Other times they're very equal matches. And as teams get smarter, agents are going to get smarter. And one of the interesting things, and you can even go look at Koskinen versus Chiarelli, Lucic versus Chiarelli. I mean, you can look at it all over the places. The agents realized the market inefficiencies first, and they got wise really quick. Some GMs didn't, and there's lingering contracts that show that. It takes two to make a contract, and you can't ignore that.
Just before you leave, Peter, I'll discuss what Ack wrote about this morning, talking about a Panarin rumor that he was told by one of his sources that Columbus is pondering an offer or talking with the Islanders, which has been one of the potential destinations because it fits the rumored criteria of what Panarin would be looking to go to after this year. He doesn't specify a name going back, but essentially saying that a player that has UFA status with the Islanders could be going back to Columbus, and that possibly extensions for both would be in the mix. Now, I can only gather from that it would be, an Anders Lee. I don't think they want to trade Lee, but maybe a Brock Nelson of somebody of that nature, because those are the two main UFAs. I mean, I'm obviously until something, I'm a little skeptical about that but I think that sort of provides a little bit of a buffer, Peter, to Columbus in terms of getting a body or getting somebody back that enables them to still remain competitive and get something. But I would think that they would have to get more than just a guy to fill Panarin's spot. They would have to get some sort of futures, because otherwise,
Columbus is in the perfect situation to test what some people in the analytics community have wanted to happen. And I brought this up before. You go all in and you try and win and do your playoff run, get some revenue in the coffers for the franchise and stuff, and you don't trade either of them. And you let the chips fall where they may in the offseason. And you do two things. One, no, you're not going to replace Panarin. You're not going to replace Bobrovsky with just signing a free agent. That's a loss. But you may avoid signing yourself to something so prohibitive that it causes you problems later. And this is where I think so many people with our analytics-minded friends and great arguments and unreal information. I love looking at it. It's way above my pay grade now what these guys are doing. But that's a base argument of the data will say it's worth not taking that risk. It's better for you to not take the risk of these long-term high salary things than it is to do it. So Columbus is a really interesting example of that. So to get them, you're going to have to give up a ton, because to Jarmo, those two guys, look where they are in the division right now. They're super important in having a playoff run. And you know what? I don't know if I'd want to face the Blue Jackets going into the first round, not with the way they've been playing. And if they continue playing that, that's a dangerous team. And that's valuable to the organization, because playoff revenue is essentially free money. So,
I mean, with the Islanders, Russ, Eberle is a UFA, but nobody would think that would be the piece going back. Filppula is a veteran UFA. It's Nelson or Lee, and I would think that they would want to keep Lee over Nelson. So I would assume
either one, because they're both UFAs. Like, I don't think they're going to want to deal with that. They're going to want somebody under contract.
Right. Well, I mean, and the thing is, if it's that, then you're probably talking about a Josh Bailey, or you're talking about somebody young like a Beauvillier, or
Beauvillier and a prospect and like a second round pick.
Yeah, and you know what? I think the prospect should be one of the two guys that they drafted in the first round this year. A Wahlstrom.
Although Wahlstrom's really having a horrible college season this year, they won't do that. They won't do that. Give me Beauvillier, Josh Hosang, and a second. That's what I want.
Yeah, I mean, that would make more sense, but then Columbus basically says, okay, we're giving you our best player and we're checking out of the playoff race because
I'm not doing that. I mean, Beauvillier can still score and Hosang might get in your lineup, and I'm competing for the playoffs, but I have two guys now that I move forward with in the future. Whether it's Brock Nelson or Lee, I can go far in the playoffs, but now I'm in the same position I would be in with Panarin.
I agree, and I think that's the point. If they know for a fact that he is gone, that they can't sign him, then they should move him for as much as they possibly can before the deadline. If it's still in doubt, then maybe you roll the dice. But I mean, it's a risky proposition because if he does sign someplace else on July 1st, then All right, we'll take some questions in the chat if anybody has a few, and Peter, we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Okay,
see you tomorrow, guys.
All right. So first question, and I'm not going in order here, but BK Ups asked me one that I definitely need to answer. Do I write redrafts on Sportsology? I will take a peek if so. BK, I appreciate it. I don't do that. I don't like it. I don't play Remember When for an entire draft. I will say, hey, like I did on the board, there's other guys when somebody drafted somebody, but I won't do that for an entire draft. I just don't believe in it. So I'm going to lose some hits there, but it's okay.
Don't worry, I'll do it on my blog on HockeyBuzz.
There you go. All right. Let's see.
I'll let you in on a secret. Freddie Gauthier would not be at the top of the 2013 draft.
If you only knew that then, well, if they only knew that then.
Yeah, it's sort of unfair. Like I can't remember what draft it was, but it was the draft with Kucherov, and Kucherov was a second or a third round pick, and they have him like he'd be the first pick. Great. All you have to do is line up the amount of points that you have in that, and the guy who's leading that draft class in points is the guy you pick first. But nobody in their right mind had Kucherov in the first round, let alone, I mean.
Yeah. Robert, it's true. Robert Coyne asks, Rusty, you think it's possible that the Flyers look at trading Ghost with Sanheim getting better and Sanheim being better defensively? Originally I thought that they were going to trade Ghost, but then when they sort of had this reboot, they really worked hard at rehabbing him, and I think harder. I'm not sure they're doing that just to trade him, so I don't think they're going to trade him. I think it's possible. Look, if they get bowled over for a deal, anybody can be traded, but I don't think he's at the top of the list to be traded.
I think they're looking at one thing. They're looking at the very, very reasonable cap number that he's at, which is I think four and a quarter. And they're saying if we can get him back to where he was a year ago, then he is such a bargain that A, we can get overpaid in a trade, or B, we're benefiting from him just being the player that he is and keeping him.
Yeah, I think that's true as well. Let's see. Guy Latouche wants to know, Russ, what kind of value do you think the Sharks can get for LeBanc? He's down on the fourth line, but still getting points on the power play. He is right now on the Sharks a power play specialist that doesn't get a lot of even time strength. He could get more. I don't know if they could afford to trade him though, because again, they need scorers when it gets into the playoffs.
Yeah,
they might trade more futures for a player, but I don't think they'll trade LeBanc. I just don't.
Yeah, plus LeBanc could move up in that lineup next year with, depending on what success they have in re-signing Pavelski. I mean, Thornton is probably gone. They're a little long in the tooth, and there's a lot of people seem to think that they're going to go for it all this year, and maybe LeBanc or somebody like that would be at the price that they have to pay in a trade. But I think they have to look forward and say we're a little older up front, and we've got to keep young guys like LeBanc around.
Yeah, and Mike is right. Paul Warner is off Twitter for now. Keep an eye on it. I still say keep an eye on that. All right, let's see. Adam wants to know, could someone get James Neal cheap? Maybe get Calgary to eat half his salary. They won't eat half his salary. I don't think anybody wants James Neal. I think Calgary has to just work with him. I think that deal is prohibitive, and he's in the first year of it, right?
Yeah, first year. He's got 4 more years at $5.75 million. The only place I could see him now, interesting thing that popped up. They say Pittsburgh is on the prowl for a winger. There's some connection between them and Carolina for Michael Furlan. That's been out there, reported out there. What would you think? What would you think of Vegas reacquiring him? Trading a guy like Pacioretty who hasn't really worked out.
I don't know. Pacioretty had a great goal last night. I think, I think they're sitting on Pacioretty. If I look at it, Pacioretty still has a good trigger on his shot.
Yes.
James still doesn't. So,
yeah, I mean, Vegas has got to consider themselves lucky that he was looking for that extra year, because apparently they were 4 years on him, and he wanted the 5th, and he took the 5th. So
yeah. Somebody was asking, is Jacob Trouba an RFA next year?
Yes, he's 1 year away from UFA, so
Right.
he can go to arbitration. But as we talked about many times here, he goes to arbitration, he gets a 1-year award. It's over with. He's going to walk. He's not going to re-sign with Winnipeg. Winnipeg won't have the cap space. So as Peter has said, more than likely what's going to happen is he gets traded in the summer. They keep him, they make the run, and then he gets traded someplace where he will sign an extension, because I don't think anybody will give up a ton to trade for him for 1 year. I think he'd have to sign an extension so they get value back.
Although there is, and I think that is possible. Although if Winnipeg gets really close this year, they may do the own rental thing and just go to arbitration with them and say, you know what?
That's possible.
We'll ride it out. They do have enough prospects in the system where it'll hurt temporarily, but it won't kill them.
No, it is possible, and you can't deny that.
All right, let's see. Steve thinks that Dubas will have Sheldon Keefe behind the bench either next season or 2020-21. Not next season, but 2021 does seem like it's possible the way things are breaking.
Here's the thing to look out for. I believe I'm correct in saying that Keefe's contract is up after this year. If he signs a long-term extension with the Marlies, that is probably more closer to NHL salary than an AHL coach, then you'll start. Then I think, and not to say Babcock's going to worry, because he's going to get his money, but then I think Babcock knows that that's the heir apparent.
Yeah.
If Keefe is going to be, depending on how many coaching openings will be at the end of the year, Keefe is going to be at the top of the list for most of those, or near the top of the list. He'll get interviews, but if he doesn't go, if he stays with the Marlies,
just ignore it.
Yeah, I mean, if LA is a possibility, Anaheim is a possibility,
and being like the highest paid AHL coach next year,
right? And if that's the case, then he's probably the next coach of the Maple Leafs. It's just a question of when. Yeah. And if they sign him for a 4 or 5 year deal, then they could simply just wait for Babcock's the length of his contract, because he's got 4 more years after this year. Yeah, I mean, he could just be a well paid coach in waiting.
Yeah. All right.
Couple more.
Mike wants to know, any rumors out there, Chicago being a seller, and who would they trade? Look, they've stopped using Keith and Seabrook in big situations, so they can't be traded. Corey Crawford has concussion issues, so he can't be traded.
Brandon Saad,
but what would he really bring? I mean, I watch Brandon Saad in the crease now, and he's not even the same guy. I mean, they might be able to get something for Saad, but it's probably better to keep him and hope that something happens in his game.
Yeah. There's always been connection between Saad and Pittsburgh, because I think he's from the Pittsburgh area.
He is, yes.
Yeah, but he's got 2 more years at $6 million, and that's right, exactly. Unless they're taking something back.
Yeah, unless they're trading Saad for Kessel, which they wouldn't do.
Right, and Anisimov has got 2 more years. I mean, he's tradable, and if they think that the Dylan Strome can move up as a number 2 center next year, maybe they'd be willing to do that. But I'll tell you right now, because I've had a number of
trade. They really don't have much.
I've had a number of Leaf fans say, "Oh, the Leafs should trade for Seabrook or Keith." look at their contracts. First of all, I don't think Stan Bowman is retaining 50% of Keith or Seabrook's salary. Seabrook is making almost $7 million for another 5 years. Keith is making making 5.5 for another 4 years. If they retain 50%, you're talking about retaining 3.5 on Seabrook and close to and 2.5 or 2.75 on Keith, and then it's the term that kills you. And they're not even like Russ is saying, they're not Keith and Seabrook anymore. They're shadows of their former selves.
Yeah. Now it's not to say they won't get better in the offseason. Like Taves got a little uptick this year.
Right.
But that's what they're going to hope for. I don't think they're going to do much.
Right, but this is not like a Larry Murphy scenario where he goes from Toronto where he was terrible and goes to Detroit. He happened to play with some guy named Lidstrom. That helped.
It helped. It did help. Adam wants to know anything going on with the Sabres. Anybody calling about who? And Esmir is like, what's Buffalo going to get for below? Like they're going to get a third or a fourth round.
Yeah, no. I mean, the one thing that the Sabres have is cap space. Now they may be in the rental market because they have 3 first-round picks.
Yeah.
I think they want to make a good case to guys like Skinner that we're in it to win it. And if they go out to get a rental, which would be probably a scoring forward, then maybe they can convince Skinner that, they're on a positive upward track and he signs an extension. Because I think that they're all focused on that right now, but they need offensive help. And I think, the bloom has come off the Carter Hutton rose. I think they should start using Allmark more.
How long is that deal for?
3 years, I believe. Yeah, the money is not prohibitive, so he can be your backup and he can be a 1B who can play 30 games, and he's only making $2.75 million. So it's not Mikko Koskinen. It's not that bad of a deal.
Yeah, the Sabres could recall they have a kid in the minors, Matt Molson. They could bring him up.
A kid.
All right, let's see. Who else?
Last question.
All right.
He's a kid like I'm skinny. No comments from the chat.
Wow, there's 2 good questions. I am going to go and pick.
Well, let's do 2 of them.
All right. So BK asks, GM trade question, any chance the Wild move Spurgeon if they're out of the playoff hunt at the deadline? Any chance T.O. can get him? No, I don't think there's a chance. Last night was a really good game for Minnesota over Vegas.
Well, let's
they played well, and the Vegas hosts wore these hideous gold jackets being given out to season ticket holders at that game. Go look them up. They are hideous.
So they got them from Wayne Newton, is what you're saying.
They look like something. I don't know where they got them from.
Take the assumption of the question into account. If they're out of the playoffs, let's say they're 6 points out of a wild card on February 24th. Dumba's coming back, but he may not come back this year.
Right.
Spurgeon is entering the final year of his contract, making a little over 5.
Right.
Their defense is not so deep that if they trade Spurgeon and get Dumba back, their number 4 defenseman is Greg Panarin.
Yeah, no, they have to hold on to Spurgeon.
I think they'll hold on to Spurgeon unless they get bowled over in and out. There are teams out there right now that are much deeper on defense that need scoring, like Anaheim, like Carolina, that are more apt to trade a defenseman that Toronto can talk to. I don't think Minnesota is going. They're going down that road.
And Guy Latouche has the question of the day. This one Mike will have to think about.
Okay.
But what about a guy like Justin Braun to Toronto? What would San Jose get? Jeremy Bracco? Let's think about it before you do the knee jerk. It's not a horrible idea.
It's not a horrible idea, but I don't think that really moves the ball. I think Justin Braun he's a 4-5. I don't think he's that,
but hear me out. I'm going to take up Guy's side for a minute. You're going to lose maybe you're going to lose Gardner, maybe you're not.
Right.
And And your old Ron Hainsey, his contract's up, isn't it?
Yeah, after this year. But the assumption is
it's that slot for Hainsey.
Well, the assumption is that next year Liljegren's going to move up, and that maybe Collie Rosen is going to move up. Now, I think
they're both really close, but I mean, they don't have any. There's no backup plan if that's really their plan.
No, there isn't. But I don't think. Let's just say this: I think Bracco is the backup plan. And again, I know people will explode when I say this. Bracco.
Say it.
Yeah, screw him. I don't care. Bracco is the backup plan for if they trade Nylander, because
I agree, but if they're not going to trade Nylander, a trade like this is something that's possibly in line.
But I think the value of Bracco as an asset increases after the full AHL season, because right now he's on a point per game pace. If he puts up a 60, 70 point year in the AHL as a 21, 22-year-old, then he becomes I think a grade A level asset for a team, especially that's looking for scoring. I think you could put him as part of a package for a deal better than Justin Braun and possibly get it. But I think they're probably still.
This is like if all those other things fail and this offer's on the table, does Dubas take it last minute at the deadline? Like when we're sitting there in that last half hour, it's possible.
I think I think in the end, if it's between that and going for a rental and paying a second round pick, he goes for the rental.
Yeah, I mean, this is, again, we're talking about deadline day show when we're finishing. Well, you're not, but when I'm finishing up pizza over there, and I think Dubas could make it. I think he at least brings up a good point. That's it.
Okay, good show. We will be back tomorrow. We'll have an early show tomorrow, probably 9 a.m. Eastern time, with Eck and maybe Peter, if he can get unfrozen in the frozen tundra of Manitoba. So for Peter Tessier, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching the Hockey Buzzcast, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.